Hi, I'm Edward Funk, and this is podcast number 89. Um, I'm getting these current podcasts from the copywritten book, The Real Story of Loretta Young. Uh, no, Behind the Door, The Real Story of Loretta Young. So, anyway, this is a story about, as I say, the dark side of Spencer Tracy. There was a side of Spencer Tracy that Loretta didn't see until many months into their relationship. He had a serious drinking problem. Loretta recalled an incident. Spencer had finished a picture at Fox, and I had finished mine. Duke, she called John Wayne by his nickname, and his wife Josie and Mama would enjoy a holiday in San Francisco. Mama would meet us in San Francisco, and Duke would also join us in the days that he wasn't working. It was Spencer's idea that he, Josie, and I would go to Santa Barbara, have dinner, and spend the night at the Biltmore. Then we drive up the next day. He had a driver. He also had his stand-in, who was kind of his right-hand man. So there was this big limo, big enough for all the five of us, plus luggage. We got as far as Santa Barbara. I wasn't conscious that Spencer had been drinking. The three of us were having dinner, and all of a sudden, he was just absolutely stoned. Finally, I looked at Josie, then excusing myself, and called his stand-in, who was in his room. I said, I think something's wrong with Spencer. I think he's drunk. He said, oh no. Just the way he said it, I thought, what's going on? He came down. Spencer said, now, we're all going to have a nice nightcap before we go to bed. You wouldn't eat any dinner. I was sitting there looking at Josie and looking at this fellow, the stand-in, and I heard a train whistle. And it dawned on me that the train goes right through. I don't know how we got on it that night. I think I called the desk clerk, and he told me the train stopped in Santa Barbara. I asked Spencer's double to get our luggage out of the car, and he did because he knew the routine. Once Spencer started to drink, he was on it for, it was 10 days to a couple of weeks. This was all news to me. I could hardly believe it. Josie and I got on the train and went up to San Francisco, and we were all staying at the Mark Hopkins Hotel. On the third night of our stay, Mama had accepted for all of us a dinner invitation from her friends, the Zellerbachs, hoping that Spencer would have arrived by then. At the very last moment, they had to be notified that Mr. Tracy was detained and would not be joining us. Right in the middle of this elegant dinner party, held in the main dining room of the Mark Hopkins, I suddenly saw Spence slipping into the room, walking very carefully indeed, and I knew he was still drinking. It was soon obvious that he was looking for me. He went from table to table, scrutinizing each lady, begging their pardon. He'd go to the next table. As embarrassed as I was for him, I knew I'd be even more embarrassed for myself had he found me. I excused myself and asked Josie to alert me in the ladies' room when he'd given up and left the dining room. It was 3 days later when he called my room, sober and apologetic. He charmed his way back in. When you love someone, it colors everything. After the Santa Barbara, San Francisco incident, 6 months went by before Loretta suspected that Spencer hit the bottle again. She recalled, Josie, Duke, Spencer, and I were going to go to the Academy Awards. I was dressed and waiting, and he just never showed. I called Josie and said, Josie, Spencer hasn't shown up. He may never come, so you and Duke just go ahead. She said, no, we'll come by and pick you up, and you leave a message to meet us down there. Spencer never did show up, and it was an evening for me of fighting back tears. I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks, and it was after midnight when Mama came in and woke me up. She said, Loretta, Carol Tracy, was Spencer's older brother and business manager. He's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. I think you better. I said, all right. Carol said, I hate to do this to you, but I'm here at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel with Spence. He won't eat, and he's been drinking for 2 weeks now. And he says that if you're not mad at him and you come over here and ask him to stop, he'll stop drinking. I asked, do you believe that? He said, well, it's a chance. Would you come if I sent a car and a driver? I said, Carol, I'm not about to walk through the Beverly Wilshire Hotel lobby at 1 a.m. alone asking for Mr. Tracy's room. He said, well, here's what we do. The limo will bring you into the basement. I'll meet you at the elevator in the basement, and we'll take it upstairs through the back elevator. Well, I agreed to go. Spencer was sitting in the corner of the sitting room, just leaning against the corner, and he was drunk as a coot in some of his pajamas. Carol said, he's been this way for 2 weeks. I put my arms around him, and he just hung on, and he started to cry. He said, I'm sure I wouldn't be this way if you and I were able to get married. The only response I could give him was to hold him in my arms. I asked, has he had anything to eat? Carol said, he won't eat, that's the problem. I ordered some soup, but when it arrived, I tried to give it to him. He wouldn't open his mouth. I went into the bathroom to see if there was a funnel to use. There usually is a little medicine kit, and sure enough, there was a tiny funnel. I said, oh, okay, open your mouth, Spence. He opened his mouth, and I put the funnel in. Then Carol held the funnel while I poured the soup down. Spencer was shaking his head back and forth, but he was so drunk, he didn't know enough to open his mouth and let the funnel fall. Anyway, the funnel slipped a bit, and some soup spilled on my hand, and I said, oh, God, Carol, it's too hot. I'm burning up. Every time I think about this, it makes me sick to my stomach. Needless to say, he didn't drink any more liquor. He couldn't. His throat was so burned. Carol called the doctor, who eased my guilt by telling me it was not serious. Spence finally fell asleep, and Carol led me back to the waiting limousine in the basement. 3 days later, he came over and started to talk about it, and I said, no, let's not. Just promise me you won't. He said, oh, never, I promise. At age 21, I didn't know anything, and I didn't want him to talk about it. You think it will go away? Well, it won't. After that, I got used to his disappearing for 10 days at a time, knowing that he was on a binge. Loretta was in the hospital for some minor operation when she was exposed to another of Spencer's drinking episodes. Josie Wayne was visiting and spotted him. She said, oh my God, look, there's Spencer coming down the hall. He's been drinking. I responded, oh, hide me quickly. And she put me into the bathroom of my room and locked the door. It took her a half hour to talk him into going back downstairs, where his driver was waiting for him. It was the reality that their union could not be sanctioned by the Catholic Church more than Spencer's drinking that ebbed away at the happiness of their relationship. And even though their lovemaking never reached full physical consummation, with the Church's strict guidelines, there was still plenty to discuss in the confessional. Loretta recalled the priest telling her, this is a married man no matter what you think. I can't give you absolution unless you promise me you're not going to see him again. I said, well, he's right outside the church waiting for me, so I know I'm going to see him again. Please, Father, I can't break it off that quickly. I'm in love with this man. Anyway, he wouldn't give me absolution. So I walked right across the aisle to Father Degman. He was known as a very tough confessor. I told him that Father Shepard had just refused my absolution and why. I told him the whole story. Finally, he said, if you promise me you'll come back here in this confessional every week until I tell you that you don't need to come back anymore, I'll give you absolution. I went outside and explained this whole thing to Spencer. Now, being a Catholic, he understood. He understood the situation perfectly. He said, well, thank God for Father Degman. At least it gives us some breathing room. But the poor man was so frustrated because our romance was in no way fulfilling to him. It was not an affair, it was two people in love trying not to have an affair. I was a bundle of romance and religion and ambition to be a movie star. All these things were all wrapped up in me. I think at that time, religion to me was mainly rules and regulations. I didn't understand much more. But I knew that when I deviated from those rules, I didn't find much satisfaction in my life. It always ended up with me being very unhappy. I think if I hadn't been married out of the church when I was 17, I might have been tempted to marry him. I'm not saying that Spencer would have, he never did. But I knew what a disaster the situation with Grant had been, and I hadn't even been in love with that man. Imagine the pain it would have been with Spencer. I knew better. We both knew better, and we talked about it an awful lot. When Spencer was serious, he was deadly serious, and was usually about our situation. It was times like this when I would see the dark side of his Irish nature. In an unguarded moment, there was a sense of doom, something simply dark. We decide not to see each other. In 3 or 4 days, we'd go out, he'd call, and I'd say, well, let's go for a little while or something. It took 6 months to make the wrench. Falling out of love with someone is kind of like a little death uh, in itself. I don't think I ever quite fell out of love with Spencer. Well, wait a minute. Okay. Another podcast is coming. Be ready for it. Oh.